fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you have had the good fortune to tune into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the happiness and health of your neighbors and your friends and your family and your pets and your garden and pretty much everybody and everything, because we are all part of this this ecosystem that we all are, that surrounds us and that we're part of. It's kind of like the Force, you know, back in the old Star Wars idea that really the environment does surround all of us and provide us with what we need, and it's just up to us to provide the environment with what it needs to continue to do that. And so every week on this show, we kind of look at what's going on in terms of how we're dealing with the environment, how we're interacting with the environment. And the environment I'm interacting with right now is I'm back in good old Ohio. Yes, I'm sitting actually still at my home. I'm looking out the window at the snow, and it's good to be back. If you're a follower of the show, you know for the past 10 weeks or so, I've been stuck in Massachusetts. And I got to tell you, you can only take the beautiful, rugged, varied coastline and the ocean and all that, you know, intense beauty and all that variety that you get every day living next to the ocean. It's kind of nice to be back here in Northwest Ohio, where everything's flat and you can just sort of count on everything looking pretty similar every single day. And and you know, it's nice. It's an acquired taste. I mean, I grew up in Western New York, and my wife is the one from Ohio, but I have acquired the taste. I do like it around here. I like being able to look out my window and see the things that I see all the time. It's kind of comforting. So, but we came back after being gone for 10 weeks and had to look at the mail, and there was a few alarming things in the mail. Oh, but first, before I get into that, let me say that this is a call-in show. So call in, please, at any time at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. This is the best show in Ohio, but it gets better every time you call. And we'll take calls on any kind of environmental issue or question. We'd be happy to answer them. So my wife and I came back after 10 weeks being gone, and of course there was a huge mountain of mail to deal with. And one of the things that we had to deal with, and something that people who've been stuck here in Ohio and stuck in their homes might want to know, is that all along the East Coast, most of the states have gone from toll booths to completely automated toll taking. That is, they've got these sort of frameworks that go over the toll road, and they've got lights on them, and they've got cameras on them, and they take pictures of every single car and truck that goes through there, and then they mail you a bill. And the push for this, I'm assuming, has been a result of COVID, because now you don't have those toll takers anymore that you have to interact with. And you can drive right through the toll areas at speed, which actually does save gas. I mean, many times I've had to stop for a long time at a toll booth, and you're just sitting there and your engine's running, and you're waiting because somebody's asking the toll worker where the nearest bathrooms are or something like that. So all that is gone in most of the East Coast, and it's kind of jarring to come back and have it still here in Ohio to see actual people. But unfortunately, the tolls themselves weren't that unreasonable. The tolls were fairly affordable, but they tack on these huge late fees. It's like $20 a month late fee just for driving on a toll road. And I did a little negotiating. I got one of them eliminated and just had to pay the regular toll. But it's just something to keep in mind if you find yourself traveling now over most of the country. You're going to find that the toll booths are gone, and you just have these photo opportunities that they'll take a picture of your license plate and send you a bill. Just a kind of a heads up there for people. Another thing that was in our mail that when we got back, environmentally speaking, was a lot more alarming for us personally. And as the regular listeners to the show know, we have solar panels installed on our house. We got them installed last summer in July. And so they were there pumping away, putting electrons into the grid for about good 6 months there. And Bowling Green had a program where they would pay us for the power that we put into the grid above what we spent. And during the time that we were doing this, during this past 6 months, it turns out the average wholesale price that BG was paying was 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And so we were getting 10 cents a kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour we put onto the grid, which is great. And for the 6 months that the system was running, it came to $188. And so that sounds terrific, doesn't it? That means every year we should, according to the way things were, we should get about a $360 check at the end of the year. And since my wife and I are on the verge of retiring, that we were figuring that would be our Christmas money every year, would be the money that the solar panels earned. Well, we also got another letter from the BG Municipal Utilities. They have decided to institute a solar energy fine. Yes, now we are being fined $4 per kilowatt every month forever, as long as we have our solar panels connected up to the internet or up to the grid. And this, of course, more than wipes out the money that we would be getting from the city. They also reduced the payout from 10 cents a kilowatt hour, which was the market rate, down to 5 cents a kilowatt hour, just because they could. So they cut in half the amount of money that they're paying us for the power that we're providing them. Just, that would be nice if you could do that with all your creditors and suppliers, wouldn't it? I mean, if you get to the grocery store and they ring up your bill and it's like $200 for a week's worth of groceries, wouldn't it be nice to just be able to say, you know what, I'm only going to pay $100. Well, that's what Bowling Green is doing to us that own solar panels now. And in addition to that, they are charging this fine, this $4 per kilowatt fine. Now, they're claiming it's for quote-unquote unavoidable costs. And I'm suspecting, although I don't know this for sure, that they have made some very bad management decisions there. But let me back up with a little history. My first dealings with the BG Municipal Utilities and the Municipal Utilities Board, it was about almost 10 years ago when Neocles Leontis and I were organized resistance to a decision that the board did, which is they decided to lock Bowling Green into a 50-year contract, that's 50, with a coal supplier, a coal energy producer in Indiana. So for 50 years, and now we're, like I say, it was about 10 years ago, so we've got 40 years to go. Bowling Green has committed to buying 60% of its electricity from a coal plant in Indiana. And we said at the time, we said, look, wind and solar prices are dropping like crazy, and it's just insane to lock us into a 50-year contract with any energy source. And we said at the time, this cost may well be the most expensive in 5 or 10 years. Coal power from a plant like this might be the most expensive. At the time, it was one of the least expensive sources of power. But we saw the graphs. We knew what was going on. Wind and solar prices were dropping. Coal and nuclear were going up. And so if you committed to taking that, you were going to cost money. And it's true. I mean, now some solar or some wind power plants are producing power for as cheap as 2 cents a kilowatt hour. And here Bowling Green's paying 10 cents a kilowatt hour for its, its dirty coal power that it's locked into for the next 40 years. So there's a history of bad decision making at BG Municipal Utilities. And it's possible that these unavoidable costs that they're claiming need to charge us $4 per kilowatt a month for, they may have made some sort of bad deal with, let's say, a billing software provider. And some of these software companies that are providing the billing for things like net metering are really gouge the utilities that they're dealing with and the municipalities that they're dealing with. And if that's what one of these unavoidable costs are, that's not my fault. I shouldn't be penalized because they made bad management decisions. And we were counting on the revenue from these solar panels and the offset of the cost. And at least that isn't changed. My solar panels, first, they meet our power needs at the time, and then whatever's left over goes into the grid. So I'm still offsetting, I'm still eliminating the expensive power that I'd otherwise have to buy from BG Municipal Utilities. At least they can't take that away from us, at least not yet. I don't see how they could, actually, since all that's behind the meter, not in front of the meter. So we should be able to keep our benefit from solar in that way. But turning our solar panels into a liability, fining us every month forever for having solar panels, that is backwards. And we're going to fight this. There'll be more to report on this as this story goes forward. And it's just one of those terrible things you get in the mail. We have another story about people getting stuff in the mail, and we're going to get to that later in the show. So right now I like to do my little introduction here, and we're just about done with that. Then we're going to hear an interview with Dr. Mark Jacobson. And Mark Jacobson is a fantastic guy. He's a brilliant professor. He's from Stanford. And he, way back in 2014, is the one who created the roadmap to carbon-free future for all 50 states. And his roadmap has been, one of the best things about this roadmap is that it does not include nuclear energy. So he showed that it's very practical to get to a carbon-free future without nukes. And we're going to hear a nice long interview with him. Then, of course, after that, we'll hear from our sponsors, our wonderful sponsors. And then we'll have the Eco News. And this part of the Eco News is this story I'm talking about the people of Youngstown have received a letter in the mail that has a lot of implications for the future. And I want to thank Jack for bringing this story to my attention. We're going to be reporting on that. We're also going to be, as usual, reporting on other national and international news stories. And, of course, after the break, we're going to hear, after the ads, we're going to be joined by our wonderful co-sponsor, Rebecca Wood. And, of course, as I said, we'd love to hear from you. Call us at 866-240-1065. You can comment on things you hear on the show or ask questions about any kind of environmental issue. All right, so I think we're ready. I think, Russell, have you got the interview queued up there? All right, well, this is my interview. And first of all, if you could give us your name, affiliation, and what your title is.
Yeah, I'm Mark Jacobson, Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Stanford University and Director of the Atmosphere Energy Program.
Ah, that's great. Now, back in 2014, you released a roadmap showing how all 50 states could become carbon-free for their energy without relying on nuclear power. It turned a lot of heads back then and woke a lot of people up to the idea that clean energy future was a practical possibility and not just pie in the sky. How did you come up with the specifics in this plan?
Well, we did a lot of analyses. We looked at the wind and solar resources and geothermal and hydroelectric resources in each state in the United States. We also looked at what's the power demand in each energy sector. The main sectors are electricity, transportation, building, heating and cooling, and industry. And we started with data from the Energy Information Administration for each state, for each sector, and each fuel type in each sector, and the conventional fuels. And then we projected that forward to 2050 using Energy Information Administration data to estimate what would be what's called the business as usual energy use in each state in 2050. We then assumed that we could transition each energy sector to electricity or direct heat, where the electricity and heat were provided only by wind and water and solar power. So that's onshore and offshore wind, solar photovoltaics on rooftops and in power plants, concentrated solar power, geothermal electricity and heat, and existing hydroelectric power. So we assumed that transition would occur between 2014 and 2050, but it would be done by 2050. And it turns out that when you do electrify everything or provide direct heat and provide that electricity to heat with just clean renewable energy, your end-use power demand goes down quite a bit, because electric technologies such as heat pumps replacing gas heaters are much more efficient than gas heaters. They use 1/4 the energy. Electric vehicles replacing gasoline vehicles use about 1/4 the energy. So you get a huge reduction of power demand. In addition, you don't have to mine, transport, or refine fossil fuels or uranium. So you eliminate about 12% of all energy demand, because that's how much is used for those processes. So in the end, you get a huge reduction, over 50% reduction of power demand just by electrifying and providing the electricity with clean renewable energy. We did the resource analysis to see what's available in each state, and then assigned a certain number of wind turbines and solar panels for each state. And ultimately, we did a grid study looking at can we keep the grid stable with just wind, water, and solar throughout the United States. And by the way, I'll just mention that we've just updated the study for this year, and find that things have gotten even easier to solve this problem. Not only has a lot of wind and solar been installed since then, and also batteries are becoming cheaper and more storage is available. Electric cars are now more prevalent. So the pathway is actually more clear to get to 100% clean renewable energy.
That's great. So we save energy both in the way we use the energy using your plan, and we eliminate the energy required to harvest energy.
That's right. Yeah, there's a huge amount of energy just for digging up fossil fuels and uranium and transporting those energy sources, and in some cases refining them. So about 12% of all energy worldwide, in fact, is used for that purpose. And when I'll just mention that, when we go to wind, wind comes right to the turbine, solar comes right to the panel. We don't need to dig up the solar or the wind.
Right. So, so an updated roadmap would look even easier today. And I suppose the improvements in wind technology and the improvements in solar panel efficiency that have happened since 2014 would also make this an even more practical solution.
Yeah, the technologies have become much more efficient, but also much cheaper. And so the cost is much lower than we projected back in 2014. And yeah, in fact, to transition the entire United States to clean renewable energy, which is basically the Green New Deal, that would cost on the order, the total capital cost would be about, was it $7.8 trillion or so? It's less than $8 trillion, which sounds like a lot, but in fact, in 2050, the fossil fuel cost of all energy will be about $17 trillion. So it's on the order of 60% lower cost than a fossil fuel cost. But that $17 trillion is really, I should caveat that there's also on top of that fossil fuel cost, there's the health and climate cost of fossil fuels, and that's trillions of dollars more. On a worldwide scale, fossil fuels cost about $30 trillion for health costs and another $30 trillion for climate costs in 2050, and that's way more than the cost of clean renewable energy.
And I think it's important for our listeners to remember that ultimately that 17 trillion for the fossils and all the other trillions you just mentioned ultimately comes out of their pockets, since they're the ones that have to pay the companies to mine and refine and transport and provide us with this with the fossil fuel energy. So the cheaper our energy sources, the more disposable income we all have. The less we have to spend on gas, the more we've got in our pockets.
Right. Yeah, that's true. If we transition to clean renewable energy, in terms of energy costs, the annual energy costs are about 60% lower in the United States. So that means you have more money to spend on other necessities like food and shelter and
maybe even the occasional non-necessity, like some fun things like once in a while too.
Yeah, to maybe take a vacation from COVID.
That'd be nice. So there has been pushback against the ideas you've presented in the roadmap. I mean, I regularly on the internet face trolls and people to this day who just flat out say wind and solar and the other clean energy technologies are just not practical yet, quote unquote. What would you say to these doubters?
I think they're like 10 years behind. I mean, there are 11 countries in the world that are 100% clean renewable energy, and there are many places that are getting close, and even in the United States. There are, in California, we're over 50% clean renewable energy. Vermont is actually on the order of over 90% clean renewable energy, mostly hydro from Canada coming in. But Washington State and Oregon have huge amounts of clean renewable energy. Iowa has a lot of wind. More than 50% of its electricity is from wind. South Australia, it was actually 100% solar for at least 1 hour last year. Which is amazing. I mean, that's a huge area where 100% of the energy in 1 hour was just from solar radiation. So we're seeing larger and larger installations, and then as a result, higher penetrations of renewables throughout the world. Some places are going to 100% renewables faster than others. But there are all sorts of ways. I mean, most people are concerned with renewables about keeping the grid stable. Like if there's not enough wind or solar, how do you keep the lights on? And there are many ideas. Aside from just using batteries and other types of storage, you can use what's called demand response, where utilities give people incentives not to use electricity at certain times of the day. You can use heat pumps coupled with wind and solar. Heat pumps provide heating and air conditioning for buildings. And so when you have too little wind and solar, then you can slow down the heat pumps. When you have too much, you can then pump them up more, and so that's a way to balance the grid partially. But there's also all sorts of other storage options. There's gravitational mass, where when you have extra wind or solar, you lift a concrete block or you push a train up a hill. When you need that electricity, you let the train roll down the hill or lower the concrete block. It's the same thing with pumped hydroelectricity. When you have excess wind or solar, you push water up the hill. When you need electricity, you let the water drain down the hill. So that's the most common type of storage there is in the United States right now, is pumped hydro.
Okay, so it sounds like your short answer to people like that is that it is already being done in many places. So it's a reality already. It's not a future thing.
Yeah, it's a reality. 100% renewables exist in 11 countries right now.
Wow. Okay, now your main academic expertise is in computer modeling of the atmosphere. 20 years ago, those crude or early models were already predicting many of the things that we actually are seeing now, like the shrinking ice caps and hotter temperatures and so forth. Could you tell us a little bit about how atmospheric modeling has improved and sort of an overview of what some of the latest models are showing contrasted with those early models?
Well, I think the biggest improvement is in computer speeds. Namely, computers have gotten bigger and faster, and this has allowed higher resolution modeling. So that higher resolution improves the accuracy. So I think in general, previous models were giving the right, in terms of global warming, have been giving the right answer for a long time, but the details of the actual magnitudes and the locations of warming and cooling are now getting better. And some of the feedbacks are being modeled better. One of the things I did was look at the effects of black carbon and brown carbon particles on climate and their feedbacks to clouds. Like, for example, burning soot or burning diesel exhaust produces soot, and the soot will burn off clouds. And that's a positive feedback, because when you have less clouds, that means more sunlight gets to the surface and increases warming. So not only does soot, which is black or dark brown, absorb sunlight, heating the air directly, and that causes part of global warming, but it also burns off clouds, allowing more sunlight to get to the surface and a positive feedback. And not only that, soot will then deposit on snow or sea ice and melt the snow and ice, and that will then reduce the albedo or reflectivity of the surface by uncovering a darker surface below the snow or sea ice, such as the land or the ocean. And that will allow even more sunlight to get to the surface and a positive feedback. So there are multiple positive feedbacks associated with black carbon that warm the planet, even past the initial warming due to this itself.
So your models have gotten very detailed and complex. Are you able to incorporate, this is my own personal curiosity, how aeroplankton like Pseudomonas or something like a tree pollen affect processes like cloud formation? Are they that sophisticated yet?
Yeah, so like in the models I've built, we include the effects of pollen and spores and bacteria and any kind of marine detritus going into the air on clouds, because all clouds form on top of particles. You need particles present for a cloud to form. Water will then condense on the particle. Now, if you have no pollution, then all the particles are natural particles like pollen and spores and bacteria and clay, minerals, and sea spray. And so you'll tend to have fewer, bigger cloud drops. But when you add pollution into the mix, then you have a lot more particles present, and so the existing water vapor will condense over more particles, and so then you have a bunch of smaller cloud drops. And so you find in polluted air that the clouds are smaller drops, but more of them. And that actually is more optically thick than if you have fewer larger drops with the same water content. So if you go to like Hawaii, you'll find fewer drops, bigger drops, so you get bigger raindrops, in fact. But in a place like Beijing, clouds almost disappear because you have so many pollution particles that the cloud water is spread over so many of these particles that they're small. And then you have on top of that, the black carbon goes into these clouds and heats them up and then evaporates them. And so you really have disappearing clouds. So in some parts of China, for example, and Southeast Asia, you just don't have clouds anymore because of the pollution.
Wow. So plenty of smog, but no clouds.
Yeah, it's just a big haze. It's just a lot of haze.
And I guess that would mean a lot less rain, too, a lot less precipitation.
Yeah, well, the rain will form because the water has to go somewhere. There is a lot of water in the air, and it'll generally then form downwind somewhere where you do get where the pollution is lower, and then you can get normal clouds forming again.
So you mentioned positive feedback in terms of soot there, but would you say in terms of carbon, are we caught in a positive feedback loop planet-wide?
Yeah, well, carbon dioxide creates positive feedbacks over the Arctic, for example. Well, so over the Arctic, the temperatures are rising over the Arctic and over ice-covered surfaces faster than over other places on Earth, and due to what's called the snow albedo effect. So let's say you put CO2 over the Arctic, then that causes warming, and that will melt some ice, and that'll uncover the darker surface below. Because in the Arctic, you have fresh snow on top of sea ice, on top of ocean water, because the Arctic is an ocean. And the reflectivity of fresh snow is highest, around 90%. Sea ice is about 60%, and seawater is around 7 or 8%. So as you start melting those layers, you get darker and darker surfaces below. So CO2 over the Arctic creates a positive feedback by not only causing warming, but that warming then melts this snow and then the sea ice to get to the ocean, where the sunlight will then be absorbed by the ocean surface. Now, black carbon does the same thing over the Arctic. It'll melt the snow and the sea ice, uncovering the dark ocean below and increasing the albedo. So they both serve positive feedbacks. In fact, all greenhouse gases and particles act in a positive feedback manner over the Arctic and over ice surfaces.
Okay, well, if people are interested in this roadmap you've created or in your computer modeling work, how can they follow what you're doing?
Well, I'm on Twitter at MZ Jacobson, but also I actually wrote a textbook recently that just came out. It's called 100% Clean Renewable Energy and Storage for Everything through Cambridge University Press. And it really discusses kind of all our renewable energy plans and the details of them, how to get to 100% renewables by states and countries and cities and towns and in your own home as well. And it also looks at my own journey through this process. So I think those are kind of the two main resources. If people are interested in the actual plans that we developed, there's a webpage as well, but that is through my Stanford web address, but it's too long to try to say. But it's pretty easy to find. Or you can email me at jacobson@stanford.edu, and I can give you information about that. Yeah, if you search under my name, Jacobson at Stanford, my website's pretty easy to find.
All right, great. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to say that I think it's technically and economically possible to do such a transition to 100% clean renewable energy and storage for everything. It's really a social and political issue, so that's what we need to navigate, how to get people supportive of a transition, because it will benefit everybody in terms of cost, in terms of health, in terms of jobs, and in terms of energy stability and energy security and climate. So there's really little downside, so it would be great to get everybody's support, and it's something that everybody can rally around and benefit from. So hopefully we can do that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jacobson.
Sure. Thanks for having me on your show.
Okay. And I think it's important to note that this project, this roadmap that Dr. Jacobson came up with, isn't just electricity. We often, when we're talking about energy and the transition to carbon-free future, we talk about, changing our electrical generation, which is an essential part. but it is only part. And his plan includes everything. It includes electrical generation, it includes transportation, it includes agriculture. I mean, he really has laid out a roadmap to a completely carbon-free future, a green future. And as he said, it's one, and this is the point we make every week, or try to make every week, it's one where you have more money, you have better jobs, you're healthier. You know, it's a win-win, win-win, win-win for all of us. But there are, as he said, political forces that are trying to prevent this from happening. And it's up to us to get past those backwards forces. And so one thing that we are grateful for, though, and one thing that can help you as you're trying to come to terms with everything that's going on in the world, is visiting parks. And our sponsor for this hour is the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways to get a hold of them. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. They also have a website, which is wcparks.org, wcparks.org. And you can go to their app store. You can go to any app store and download their app, which you just search for WC Parks. And in addition, they're on the social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter and so forth. And so that's the Wood County Park District. We're very grateful to have them as a sponsor. And we are also grateful for our patrons. And our patrons are people who've gone to patreon.com and they searched for a Green Future. And they saw there several engaging and attractive pictures and some descriptions of the different levels. And they picked a level that was appropriate for their budget. And now every month, a little tiny bit comes out of their checking account and comes over to us. And we're very grateful for it. It helps keep us on the air. So that's patreon.com, and just search for a Green Future. And we're also grateful for our co-host, Rebecca Wood. I understand you're on the line with us now. I am, yes. And I should like to point out that you a few minutes ago called me a co-sponsor. I'm not a co-sponsor. Oh, sorry.
Just a co-host. That's okay.
Right. Well, you're...
Most people get confused and think that I have money.
Yes, we don't want to give people that impression, no. But
no.
Well, you're a co-creator. How's that, of the show?
There you go. That sounds good.
Okay. And so I think that people are ready to hear some interesting stuff. I understand you've been researching sort of eco-friendly ways to die, or not exactly to die. What happens after you die? Is that correct?
Yeah, people have been sharing about this online, friends of mine, and yeah, it turns out that just like very recently, 3 facilities opened in Washington State, in Klickitat County near the Columbia River Gorge, which do human composting. Essentially, they will turn you into hummus for a modest fee, apparently, and then your family.
Wait, Rebecca. There's an important distinction to make here. There's hummus, yes, and then there's humus. Humus.
Oh, humus. Yeah, more humus.
Yeah, the stuff.
Nobody wants hummus made out of you.
No, I would not.
True.
I would not promote turning people into hummus. No. So, okay. Go.
Yeah, hummus looks sort of. I'm sorry. If I were a better, more sophisticated person, I'm sure I would like hummus, but it looks and tastes like vomit to me. But sometimes I eat it anyway. Yeah, that's not gonna. If you're on the line about hummus, that's not going to help you. Yeah, but
all right,
yeah.
So they want to turn you to humus. Okay, go on.
Yeah, humus, not hummus. Very good. Yeah. You're just waiting to get me back about that correction thing, weren't you? And your opportunity came really quickly.
Well, we just need to strive to be accurate. Okay, go on.
We do, especially with things like that, yeah. But yeah, apparently what they do is it's a good process because it uses much less energy and doesn't pump you full of poisons and weird stuff. But they put you in a giant barrel, which is euphemistically referred to as a cradle, which makes it sound nicer, I guess. But really nothing that happens to your body after you die is good. You know, I could sit here and tell you about the process of the normal embalming and you'd be like, ooh, because it's not good. But yeah, the process takes several weeks apparently. Basically, they put you in a with 200 gallons of wood chips. They put in bacteria, protozoa, and fungi, and they add oxygen at intervals to try and keep you at between 145 and 155 degrees Fahrenheit. And then they have some solar panels in case you're not hot enough. And then they tumble you, basically. So you know how backyard composters work. You crank a little handle, or not. Hopefully it's mechanized, because that would have to be a big handle. But yeah. They tumble you for a while, and then they filter out your fillings and pacemakers and what other spare parts you have. Oh, and they crumble the bones for the phosphorus, to release the phosphorus. And, it's a 55-gallon drum that they put you in. That's nice. And then your family either gets to take home the resulting humus.
Yes. Humus. Yeah, go on.
Nobody wants hummus. Yeah. I'm sorry. But yeah. Or you can donate to their little forest thingy they have there that they have to spread out people's humus on.
Well, I think it's a lot more environmentally friendly than... I have a friend who unfortunately lost a son who was in his early 20s, lost him to cancer. And he chose to be buried in a forest, basically, without preservatives. And it's sort of the same idea, but
right. But unlike this, there was a previous procedure, commercialized procedure, where they would kind of just make you part of the tree's root ball, and you could be sort of composted that way. But I should like to point out that because you're sort of all nice and sort of already, reduced to a powder before you go into the soil, into the forest at this point, that there's less risk of haunted forests, which have been pointed out as a possible drawback to the whole becoming part of a root ball thing,
Interesting.
So
okay.
I would think that would sort of confuse your spirit so that you didn't sort of, pick a particular tree to haunt, and it, you wouldn't be walking through the forest and there would be scary faces coming out of the bark and things.
Well, it's a tricky question, but all right. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that report, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
Yes, and if you have any comments on this, if you'd like to be composted after you die or would not want to be composted, just give us a call. You can join Rebecca and myself at any time here, 866-240-1065. So, on to Eco News, and we've got a lot of it, and we're going to have to kind of rush through it here. As I said at the top of the hour, yes, the people of Youngstown have received a letter, and it turns out that their city of Youngstown has decided to do an energy aggregation, which we've talked about that before. We had Kathy Cohen-Becker on, and she talked about how basically a city can pool all the electric bills for the residents and then use it to buy bulk electricity and get lower prices for them, which is great. Unfortunately, the city of Youngstown has decided to go with Energy Harbor as their aggregate supplier. And as we know, Energy Harbor is that horrible corporation that owns Davis-Besse. And so... Oh, I'm sorry. I keep saying Akron. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Youngstown. This is all Youngstown. Forget Akron.
Oh, there you go.
Substitute Youngstown. Okay. Still, the city of Youngstown has told their people that now you're going to be buying from Energy Harbor. And they didn't happen to mention in this letter anywhere that means you're going to be buying nuclear power. And they're able to offer it at a pretty cheap price because of all the backroom deals and the money they're getting from House Bill 6. So, the whole state is essentially subsidizing the city of Youngstown's power because everybody in the state gets penalized through House Bill 6. That money goes to Energy Harbor. Oh, a caller from Youngstown. All right. And we have a caller
Right.
from Youngstown.
Yeah, hi.
Yes, caller, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm from Youngstown. I'm a first-time caller, Joe. And
Well,
I
I'm
have
happy
to
to hear.
tell you, you know what? I am so grateful that you are running the kind of show that you are. I can hear you in the background talking about the House Bill 6, and that's basically what I was calling about. It kind of fills in the blanks of why we've got this social, political stuff going on. And it all boils down to me to a deep sense of corruption that's going on within our state. You know, why else would we be funding the nuclear power plants? Why would we be penalizing you for having solar panels on your house? I have a daughter that lives in Columbus, and there's extreme fees on electric cars there. Everything environmentalists try to do, you know, to try to mitigate climate change is being headed off by, you know, big industries yet, or somebody that's lining their pockets with, you know, extra cash from. Anyways, I called to rant and say I totally agree with you guys, and I'm just really glad to have you as allies.
Oh, well, that's great, Chris. Thanks for this call. And one thing about this aggregate policy that they sent the letters out. The letters dated January 11th there for Youngstown, but you only have until February 1st to opt out of it.
That's right. That's tomorrow. Mm-hmm.
That's tomorrow. So it's like less than 2 weeks to figure out, you know, to actually try to discover that you'd be forced to buy nuclear power, and then to pick an alternative, which is next to no time. And that, to me, that also speaks of corruption. That says we didn't want to actually give people any kind of choice on this. We want to ram this through without giving clean energy, truly clean energy, a fair shot at this. So,
and you're so right. And one other thing, you know, when you're talking about the choices that we have, if you do the apples to apples, like the utilities tell you to do, you know, there's like 400 different choices that you get on their website. Now, you know, we're just talking about 2 weeks to make a new decision on your power. Who has the time to go through all these things?
Yeah.
I mean, it's mind-boggling to me. Yeah.
So, well,
I didn't
Chris,
count all of them, but the pages, you know, tell you about approximately how many different decisions you can make out there.
Wow. All right. Well, good luck with your decision, Chris. And I, you know, and I'm hoping you're going to opt out of the Energy Harbor plan anyway.
Yeah. I think that's an important thing for people to know about opting out. And I have a company called Arcadia that I subscribe to. You can get at least 50% wind power if you subscribe to that. But that's another mess in itself that's been, again, corrupted by the industry.
All right. Well, thanks so much for the call, Chris. That's wonderful.
Good talking to you, Joe. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
All right. We will. Okay. That was
Bye-bye. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
That was Chris from Youngstown. What a nice call. That was great.
Yes,
so,
it was.
Yes, you could follow Chris, of course, at 866-240-1065. We'd love to get calls. All right, on to some more eco news. We got to really rush through now, which is great because I love having calls. Big important news story. Shell has lost a case. Shell Oil has lost a case where 13 years ago there was a oil spill in Nigeria, and this oil spill was caused by they claim it was caused by sabotage, but it still ruined tons of croplands, and so the farmers sued Dutch Shell. Now the difference here is they didn't sue them in Nigerian court because that's where the thing happened. They actually sued the parent company in their own country, which is huge. This victory here, Dutch Shell lost this case. It's for the very first time now a court has said that the parent company has some responsibility for what their subsidiary, often another country, has done. And up till now, that's been the golden ticket. That's been the get out of jail free card. All you had to do was create a subsidiary who did terrible things, like, actually sponsor the murder of environmental activists like Ken Saro-Wiwa in Nigeria. And the parent company could wash their hands of everything. Oh, that's not us. That's the subsidiary. But for the very first time, a parent company is being held responsible. Now, they're not being held liable for the damages. They did not get that victory, but they are being held responsible for the negligence of having a leaking pipeline that didn't have leak detection equipment on it, and so they're required now to install that leak detection equipment. The parent company is. It doesn't matter that their subsidiary is negligent. The parent company has responsibility for that negligence. So it's not a full case, and there are some cases being argued before The Hague that may lead to that the parent company is actually liable for their negligence, but it does show that they are responsible now, so that's a big victory for the environment. So that's good news. Some other news, there, Enbridge Line 5, that pipeline which is under Lake Michigan, and is in danger of rupturing and destroying Lake Michigan and the other Great Lakes, because the oil would flow downstream through Erie and through Ontario. There's been an environmental approval for a tunnel to replace the pipeline. And this tunnel would go under Lake Michigan. It would be 10 feet in diameter. It would have lights and air ventilation and a pipeline inside of it. And so Enbridge is pushing forward with this plan, a 4-mile-long tunnel under Lake Michigan to replace the pipeline. Now, the pipeline is scheduled to be shut down in May, excuse me. The governor of Michigan actually ran on shutting down the Enbridge pipeline, and so that's one of her main campaign promises. And so that's scheduled to close in May. So let's keep our fingers crossed there. A tunnel is better than a pipeline sitting on the bottom of the lake, but the problem is the whole thing is more fossil fuel infrastructure, more billions, well, this case 500 million, 500 million wasted on fossil fuels, when, as we just heard from Mark Jacobson, that money would be much better invested on installing geothermal heating in the Upper Peninsula and replacing dirty generators that use that oil and replacing them with wind and solar. So it's something to note, and a lot of environmental organizations are saying the same thing, that we shouldn't be wasting our money on this, but it has been approved, and it looks at this point like it's going forward. Something else that's been approved, Biden's doing more executive orders. He did a lot of executive orders this week on the 27th, making climate change front and center, his administration's most important policy change. And so he did executive orders talking about environmental racism, and we know from our talk when we interviewed Lois Gibbs that most of the time the most polluting industries are being put into poor neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color, and so they're bearing a disproportionate brunt of the effects of all this toxic pollution and things like benzene and other toxic chemicals. So now preventing environmental racism is part of the approval process for any project in the federal government, and that could have a huge impact too. Another one of his executive orders, he's also created the position in the administration called the National Climate Advisor. And just a hint, just a note, I suggested last week that the National Climate Advisor might turn out to be a woman, and I was right. It turned out to be Gina McCarthy, who had been the chair of the National Resources Defense Council. And she has a pretty good environmental record, pretty good. Unfortunately, there's one aspect of environmental record which kind of raises a red flag, and we're going to have to watch. and that is she was head of the EPA for a while, which is okay, but she was also in Obama's Office of Air and Radiation, and that was the office which famously, for those of us who watch the nuclear industry, when Fukushima happened 10 years ago, and it will be 10 years this March 11th, so get ready. We're going to be talking about unplugged nuclear power next week, which marks that anniversary. But 10 years ago, when Fukushima happened, a cloud of radioactivity floated across the Pacific Ocean and over the United States. And what happened is the EPA had radiation monitors all along the West Coast. And when that cloud hit, when the Office of Air and Radiation was called upon, those radiation monitors were all turned off. So to this day, we don't have a reading, hard data on how much radiation there was. We have all these estimates, which have consistently been proven to be wrong by factors of 10 or 100 or 1,000. But we don't have the hard data because they turned off the radiation monitors as the cloud came approaching the United States. So that is a huge red flag. We have to be careful of that. All right. Well, we're out of time. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Chris, for calling. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
Them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country